Fly Fishing Insider Podcast is teamed up with Fly Fish Finder app to revolutionize your fishing adventures. Save time and unlock the ultimate experience with access to 55,000 trout streams, precise bridge data, thousands of trails, and detailed species locations. Elevate your angling with real-time maps, top camping spots, and connect with local fly shops for expert tips. This is only a little bit of what is available on the app. Discover all of it on the Fly Fish Finder app, another tool for getting better at catching fish anytime, anywhere, and for any species. Hey guys, welcome back to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Christian. We've got Andy Weiner on the line today, and Andy is, how do I say this, Andy? You've not only an angler, but you've really made a way for yourself in some of these other activities, and you're more of an all-arounder to me. We're going to talk about that. Yeah. Yep. So you've done a couple things. One, you've written the book Down by the River, which is a children's book, age 4 to 9. You can pick it up on Amazon, bookstores, fly fishing shops, etc. But it's called Down by the River. Really cool. And you wrote that book after, whatever, you've been fishing 30 years, you've been active in the community, etc. But then you took some of your learnings from that and you started an organization called reelingin-serenity.org. And
what I would say about I didn't start it, but I became a board member for the organization.
Okay, great. So you're a board member, and this is all about sobriety action.
Correct.
And very cool. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to get into fly fishing like we always do, because Andy is an angler. We're going to talk 3 Western rivers. He's got 3 Western rivers he wants to talk about, give you tips, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to talk about those. Then we're going to talk about a tip. Don't be proud, but be careful when fly fishing. And I love that. And if you're not sure what that means, stick around because we're going to give you a handful of really good tips around that area. So Andy, welcome to the show, number 1. And 2, why don't you tell me a little bit about the book and how that led you to the reelingin-serenity.org?
Sure. And the backstory is that my real job is in publishing, and I'm in book sales. And I've been involved in book publishing probably over 45 years at this point. It's been my career, and I love books. And I particularly love children's books. And after being an angler for many, many years, it occurred to me that based on my knowledge about books, that maybe I could write a children's book about the thing I love so much, which is fly fishing. And the truth is, I started that process at this point. It's probably 20 years ago, writing a first draft of a story, sharing it with people on a Northern California fly fishing board online, getting lots of feedback, trying to get that story sold so that an illustrator could be found and the book could be published. And it was a struggle. People in book publishing and editorial in particular didn't really have an understanding of how popular fishing and fly fishing in particular are. And they would read it and they just didn't understand that there was an audience for it. And then I was very fortunate that an editor who works at the company that I work for, which is Abrams Books, read the manuscript, knew it needed some work, but she and her family fished. And she loved fishing. She wanted to work with me to make it into a story that could be published. And that process on and off took about a year. And eventually she got it to the point where she thought it was going to be a book that could be accepted to be published, which was a really exciting day for me, of course.
Yeah.
And then from that point, it took probably another year and a half before the book was published. Just the process of getting the illustrations and all of the technical things that need to be done to get a book ready and to get published. And it's just been an amazing experience. The book came out in 2018. It won an award from the American Fly Fishing Trade Association as the Best Education Entertainment Product of the Year for 2018. And part of what I did when the book was published was to do quite a bit of outreach in the fly fishing community, in the conservation world, in the outdoor education environment,
Hmm.
to bring the book to the attention of people who I thought would really find it of interest, both personally for maybe a family, but also for the work that they're doing. Um, and that has been a really great experience as well. I've
I'm
connected
sure.
with
Yeah.
so many people in the fly fishing community who I never would have met otherwise. And that brings me to the connection with Reeling and Serenity. One of the people I reached out to on LinkedIn, which has been a really amazing tool for me, was a woman named Rebecca Klein, and she works for the Chattahoochee River Keepers out in
Okay.
Georgia.
Okay.
And we bonded over the book, and I sent her a couple of free copies for a fundraising event. Um, Astonishingly, she managed to sell two copies for $5,000 total.
Oh my
But
gosh.
that's more about Rebecca than it is
Yeah.
about the book. Um, and sort of tangentially to that, one of the first magazines to review the book was a fly fishing magazine called Dun Magazine.
Jen. I
And it
know
was,
Jen
yep,
Ripple from Dun
Jen is
Magazine.
awesome. And the magazine was primarily focused on women anglers, but it was a great periodical, and it certainly was interesting to men anglers as well.
Hmm.
Um, and I subscribed to the magazine after she reviewed the book. And in one issue, there was an article about a group of women anglers who, to work their sobriety, had gathered for a day of fly fishing because they knew that fly fishing was a great activity to bring them peace and serenity and healing. And so
Hmm.
there's this 6 or 8 page article in the magazine. And in the center of that article, there was a photograph of a woman with a book in front of her face, kind of covering her face because of the anonymity of sobriety. And it just so happens that the book was written by my dad. My dad was a recovered alcoholic himself, and he wrote several books that are kind of seminal books in the recovery movement.
Yeah.
And this book was called A Day at a Time. And to see it in the magazine as part of this article and as such an important thing for the women who were fishing that day, it was tremendously moving to me.
Oh, I'm sure it had to darn near bring you to tears if it didn't.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It did. And so I posted about it on social media, on Facebook, and on Instagram. And Rebecca and I had connected on Instagram. And she sent me a direct message saying, just wanted to let you know the woman in the photograph is me. Um, and we've been very public about the fact that this is the
Yeah.
story. Because a lot of times in sobriety, you're trying to maintain your anonymity, but she has come forward with the fact that she is in recovery.
Yeah.
And
Her acceptance. That's a big
is it,
piece, right?
absolutely. Um, and it was this tremendous bond between us. And she took that day fly fishing with her friends and developed it into what has become the nonprofit that you mentioned, Reeling in Serenity.
Hmm.
Um, and we've been around for a couple of years now. And as with so many other really great organizations associated with fly fishing, um, like Project Healing Water, Casting for Recovery, Real Recovery, Mayfly Project, we provide free retreats for people,
Mm.
um, take them fly fishing, and spend a day introducing them to the peace, serenity, and healing of fly fishing.
Hmm.
Um, and there's a little bit about sobriety during the day that is spent together, but really we're trying to introduce people to this incredible sport that we love so much and that has brought so much to us. It's been a really amazing experience. So she invited me to join the board, and because of who she is and the work that she's done, it was a no-brainer for me to accept that invitation, and
Hmm.
also because of my father's sobriety. And then she invited me to become president of the board. And I kind of feel like the reason she did was nobody else would take on that kind of responsibility. It's so much work.
That's
Um,
usually how volunteer boards work, right?
exactly. Um, and I made sure with her that the other people in the organization were comfortable with me in that role. And you know, full transparency, I'm not sober. I drink very little, but I'm not sober. And I wanted to make sure that it was okay with them that I wasn't sober, though most of the people on staff and on the board are. And she said, "You come from a family with substance abuse. Your dad was an alcoholic. You understand how that can affect a family. So we're really comfortable with that." And from that moment on, I took on that role. It's been
That is
incredible.
cool. That
Yeah.
is cool. And reeling in Serenity, that's for both male and female
Yes.
participants? Yeah,
Absolutely.
very cool. So if they
And
go
we
to
actually,
reelingin serenity.org, they can find out more about the program,
yeah,
see when the events are.
exactly.
Um, and is it from a sign up perspective, are there interventions in sign up as well, or is it primarily people who have already reached a certain stage and want to use that as a tool, or is it a
Yeah.
beginner tool? Kind of curious around those elements.
Yeah. It's a really, really important question. What we ask for in the participants who are um, the folks that we're taking out on these fishing days, we want them to be sober. We've discussed it internally a number of times, and we feel like 30 days is a good benchmark.
Hmm.
There are so many things that can happen as you're beginning your sobriety. We just want to be very, very careful. And we do vet the people who are the volunteers who work as well. We have no alcohol, tobacco, drugs of any kind, vaping. You can't do that during these retreats. We just want to
Hmm.
make sure that there's nothing that can affect the experience that our participants have as
Okay.
they're working their sobriety.
Okay. Very cool. Well,
Yeah.
that helps, I think, outline it for a lot of people. So, guys, if you want to either join yourself, ladies, you want to join yourself, or you know somebody that this might benefit, um, and turn them maybe into a fishing buddy with you, down the line. Go check it out, reelingin serenity.org.
And just if people are interested in reaching out, either as a participant or as a volunteer, you can just email info@reelingandserenity.org,
Okay,
and we'll get back to you.
perfect. That's really great. Let's do this. Those are very important topics. I don't want to feel like we're cutting them short because we're really not trying to. But what we
Yep.
do want to do today is talk about some fishing. I know that's super important to all of us as well. So we're going to talk about, with the limited time we have, 3 Western rivers that you've fished and had a great experience on and you'd recommend.
Yeah.
So why don't you
Um,
fire away on that? Maybe just let's keep it a secret and give us one at a time instead of here are the
okay.
3. Okay.
Yeah, actually, you and I were talking before about how I met some people when the book first came out, and they were making me prove that I was a real angler
Mm-hmm.
and asked where I like to fish. And one of them asked me, and I named a particular small stream in Montana, and he almost fell over in his chair that I actually even heard of that stream. And I'm not going to mention that stream here because it's kind of a little bit of a
It's
secret.
yep.
Um, but one I would mention is the Big Wood River in Idaho. I
Okay.
have
Yep.
fished there a couple of years, last 2 years actually. Had gone up to the Sun Valley area, and there's so much water on the Big Wood to fish, and it's so accessible. Um, but I have had just fantastic experiences. It's a great dry fly river, and there's a particular place that I have fished in the two trips I've taken up there. I've probably fished 90% of the days I've been there in this one particular access spot, um, where they're wild rainbows. They'll take a caddis just almost any time of day, and they hit really hard, and it's a thrill.
Yeah.
Um, and it's a campground site, but you can do day use. And um, I have spoken with the guy who's the campground host, and you meet these people when you're fishing who can be the most considerate, awesome, kind people. And this guy's like over the top. And just asking, "Hey, can I park here for the day?" And he said, "You're welcome anytime, and you don't even have to pay me. Next year, I think the price is going up to $8. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to take your money." And say, "Hey, $8 to fish here is well worth the price." And it's a fantastic spot.
Yeah, it's a cool place too because The Big Woods, it's a tributary to the Snake River, if I call. It's
Right.
kind of like
Right.
in, I would say, mid to south central Idaho
Yeah.
area. It
Hmm.
flows south.
Yep.
Really cool zone to be into. If you haven't been in that zone for fishing, I mean, that's one tributary. There are many.
Yeah.
So great location. You had mentioned some of the fishing. What time of years have you been there?
I think I've been there sort of August, September. Last
Mm-hmm.
year was September. Um, I'm going to be going up to Idaho again in about 3 weeks for the Trout Unlimited Western Rendezvous.
Okay.
And it's going to be in Idaho Falls. And I was trying to figure out if heading over to the Big Wood into the Sun Valley area would make sense. Called up a couple of fly shops, and their sense was this time of year it's probably not going to be great. They've gotten a lot of snow, flows are
Yeah.
going to be up, and they were recommending just hitting the Henry's Fork because there's going to be lots of great hatches going on. So that's
Yeah.
what I'll do.
This time of year, I would agree. The Henry's Fork, probably the Big Wood will probably flow a little bit higher right now, et cetera. But when you were there, what kind of fishing were you doing? Were you primarily dry fly fishing or dry
Yeah,
dropper?
no, it was. I mean, we don't know each other, and you don't know what a jerk I am about my fishing. I'm extremely stubborn, and I would say 90% of the time I'm fishing dries, and just sort of attractor patterns. And I had heard that the Big Wood was a really strong dry fly stream, and as I mentioned, caddis worked just fine.
Yeah.
And I actually fished the first year there with my girlfriend Jana, who is kind of a new angler, new fly angler, and she's really taken to it and she loves it. And I tell her all the time, "You're so unfortunate that I'm the person who's teaching you how to fly fish because there's so many better ways to catch fish than the way that I do." Um, but we were both
I don't
fishing
know if there
dries,
are better ways. There might be
different ways.
different ways, maybe more
Yeah,
efficient in nature,
yeah.
but dry fly fishing's probably the best way.
It's so fun. And I actually worked at California Trout, which is a great conservation organization, back in 2001, and we had a staff retreat, and we did a little bit of criticism, self-criticism. And my colleague, who was the head of marketing, his criticism for me was try a nymph. And I was known for not using nymphs too often.
Yeah, that's
Um,
okay. That's okay.
yeah, yeah.
It
But
is a
there's
great
another.
river. The times I've fished it, similar circumstances, I've found the dry fly fishing very good. I really never found that I had to go from a dry dropper scenario
Yeah,
in order to stay efficient on the days. And I was there for several days, and one of them was really slow in comparison, right? Not as many hatches going on, etc.
yeah,
But I really felt like that was a river for me that like you could just go with dry dropper and all day. I didn't have to
yeah,
take my, European style nymphing rod or anything like that. And it was a really comfortable river. I also liked the aspect of it. It was fairly, fairly good wading
yes,
in that
for sure.
river.
Yeah,
Yeah. There's a lot of reprieve from they go into a Madison or something like that where you have baby
mhm,
head sized cobbles that are like bowling
yeah,
balls with Vaseline on them. That river was really easy to get around in. So,
yeah. It's really manageable for me. I wouldn't say I'm the greatest angler. I'm also not very tall. I'm about
mm-hmm.
5'6", 5'7", and water that is more manageable for somebody who's maybe 6 foot or taller is
Mm-hmm.
probably a little bit more challenging for me. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
try to be careful. Also, I would mention in that area, directly in Sun Valley, there's a stream called Trail Creek. It's very public, a lot of hikers and people with dogs and people biking. But I fished there 5 days in a row and had just a blast and doing
Yeah.
just dries. Um, I talked to one of the fly shops in town, and mentioned how well I was doing on dries, and he's like, "That's really strange. It's not really a dry fly stream, but good for you."
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was really fantastic.
That's cool. That's cool. I have never fished that stream, but I've ventured over to the other side of the range into Stanley area and fished a lot of
Right.
those. So
Yeah.
it's a
And actually, I
cool
was.
zone. If you haven't visited that zone of Idaho, a very cool zone. Lots of fishing to be done and lots of exploration, outdoors, etc.
Yeah, I have a friend who is a one of the great trout artists, somebody who I've met through the fly fishing show and see him every year. And we're talking about the fishing in that area back in February in Denver. And he said, if you continue on the road that you're on for Trail Creek, and then you just go up over the top of the hills there, you come down and there's another stream down there. And he said, it is phenomenal. And I forget the name of it, but I know I just have to stay on that road and
Yeah.
keep going and I'll find it. So I'll
Yeah.
do that pretty
Someday.
soon. Yeah.
Someday, pretty soon. Well, cool. That's number one, the big wood.
Yeah.
Number two.
I'm going to go with the Deschutes. And you say the Deschutes, and it's like, what
Which
part
one?
of this exactly? And the place that I was sent to by the Bend Fly Shop, because I always depend on local fly shops. They have the best knowledge. Um, is an area called Steelhead Falls, and I've probably fished there 7 or 8 days altogether. And it's a place where the salmon flies can be coming off, and there's a number of anglers. Sometimes those fish aren't taking the salmon flies; they're taking something else. Um, and I've switched from salmon flies to emergers, like caddis emergers, and had even better success. Um, but it's a large enough area where a number of anglers can be there and have really terrific fishing. Um, but I had the experience, I guess it was May of last year, I was up there, and having been there several days and seeing other anglers, I came the last day of my trip and there was nobody around. And it's not a long hike down from where you park. It's like 20 minutes. Um, but if you're down there by yourself and you have no cell phone coverage or anything, it's just one of those places where you just have to be super conscious of where you are and what you're doing and not putting yourself in harm's way, because if you mess up, you're kind of on your own. And that's sort of what we're going to talk about at the end in terms of don't be, um, what we're going to say, don't be proud, be careful.
Yeah, yeah. When you fished the Deschutes, were you fishing in the Smiths Rocks State Park, or were you
I don't,
fishing outside of the park?
it's outside the park.
Okay.
And just sort of a general way to get there is you're driving north of Bend, um, and you go through, is it Redmond? And then you head west from there. It's kind of a
Okay.
winding river, and eventually takes you to this tiny little community. And you go down a dirt road, and there's a really small turnout, but there's a trail because people are hiking down to the actual Steelhead Falls, and the falls are below where I was fishing. So
Okay.
if you search for Steelhead Falls, it gives you pretty good GPS directions.
Okay. Yeah, because I had been a climber and been to Smith Rocks years and years ago, and always looked at the water as like, oh, it's so beautiful down there, but I never thought about fishing, right? And then of course, um, got into it later in life and was like, oh yeah, that river runs right through where I was climbing as a
Yeah,
young adult, and how cool is that? What would that be like? So I'd be interested in checking that area out. I thought it would be always cool, and did just a quick search for Steelhead Falls here, and the trailheads marked, etc. It's online, very
yeah,
good detail. So that would be a pretty cool place as well. And man, is it beautiful?
yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's
It's
one I should
amazing out
check
there.
out because I haven't done that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just one of those spots where you're standing in the river and you're looking at the cliffs in front of you and the cliffs behind you. And it's one of the reasons we love to fly fish. It takes us to these places that are as beautiful or more beautiful than just anywhere else that anyone else is going.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
I'm going to do this. I'm going to share my screen real quick. So if you guys are able to see here, you can check this out if you're on YouTube. And let's share. Boom. There's the falls,
Yeah.
Steelhead Falls. Here's a 9-second little video. Pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's really just above those falls. Um, and I mean, I can't believe I'm sharing my secrets this way. It's not really a secret, but there is this long, flat, very slow current, very, very wadeable. I think
Is
that
this
that is
it?
the exact spot. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can wade pretty much across the river at that point. Um, and there are fish rising all the time. I saw a brown rise across the stream that was probably, I can say how big I thought it was because I didn't catch it.
Yeah.
Probably 25 inches. It was just huge. And you see a fish like that come out of the water.
Eh,
Um, yeah, it's
yeah.
really, really great.
There's somebody catching them around there. Yeah, this is pretty awesome. I mean, it looks amazing. I'm going to have to definitely check it out.
Yeah. And
Haven't
it's
really
also,
done any kind of research on it or looks at it, and which is surprising, right? Because it's such a
yeah,
well-known and phenomenal river. So
yeah.
we'll
And then
see.
one of the things about it also is that there are amazing birds there, a lot of raptors,
Oh, okay.
swallows, and as you're enjoying your fishing, um, you also can enjoy these great birds. Actually, to go back to the children's book Down by the River, there's a scene before the family starts fishing, and there's an osprey flying overhead. Um, and the grandfather talks about how it's there to fish, just like they're there to fish.
Ah, I love it.
Um, and the last day that I was fishing at Steelhead Falls, um, some crows chased an osprey out of where they were because that's what crows are like,
Yeah.
and it landed in a tree just downstream from me. And I just kept fishing, and then out of the corner of my eye, I saw the osprey just dive out of that tree and smack the water and come up with a trout. And that's always the best
Yeah.
experience to see that happening. So,
Yeah. It's pretty incredible. Pretty
yeah, it's great.
incredible. Very cool. It sounds like an amazing place.
Yeah,
When you were there, weather I'm sure was amazing. I mean, the Bend area weather is it's
yeah,
not like what you think of as Oregon because it's on the other side of the range. It's dry.
yeah,
You know,
exactly.
it feels almost desert like. It feels like Idaho.
Yeah,
Um,
very much.
yeah, really cool. Okay, so that's two. We've got two in the
Yeah.
book: Bigwood River and the Deschutes River.
Yep.
Number three.
This is tough. Trying to narrow it down to the third. I'm going to go with just sort of northern New Mexico, because there's several streams up there that I really, really love. Um, the Red River is terrific. Um, sort of near the Cuesta area, north of Taos.
Mm-hmm.
The Cimarron, which is east from Taos. I think that's a
Yep.
really phenomenal place. Um, and west of there, and sort of northwest of Santa Fe, there's a national park called the Valles Caldera. It's Valles Caldera. And within the caldera, within the park, there are several extremely small streams, um, 8 to 10 feet wide. And it's a reservation system where you go to the website and you book a beat, and you're assigned that
Mm,
beat for the day.
okay.
Um, and you don't wade. You're fishing from the bank. You're going to want to fish a ways from the bank because the fish are pretty spooky.
Okay.
Um, and you can fish with beetles and have just a phenomenal day. And
Huh.
then just within that environment, again, it's just this incredible experience of the the caldera setting, the trees, the wildlife. The first time I was there, I was driving down to my beat. There was a car behind me. I came around a corner, and there was an elk and its calf, and they're just walking through this big field, and there's a coyote following them. And I just pulled over, and I was looking through my binoculars and watching this, and the guys behind me pulled over as well. And there was no way this coyote was going to get that calf because it was a huge elk mother. And we just watched for a while, and then they went out of sight. And the guys who had gotten out were like, "Oh my God, that was the most amazing thing I've ever seen." And then on
That
the
is
way
awesome.
back, I came around a corner, and there was an eagle and a hawk midair, sort of fighting each other. And again, just having to stop and watch this spectacle, it was amazing.
Yeah. And I did a little bit of just looking while you were talking. It's that's a preserve down there too. So
Exactly.
there is tons of fishing in that zone, and then
Yeah.
there's other things around. That looks really amazing too. Gosh, I'm learning a ton on this one. You're getting me
Oh,
my
cool.
my nerves going. I'm ready to go check out some new zones because
Yeah.
it's always interesting trying new places. That's one of my favorite things to do. It's just an
Yeah.
experience altogether.
There's a lot of history in the Caldera. There's ranching, and it's also not far from Bandelier National Monument, ancient um, native site. Um,
Hmm.
so it's worth it to spend several days in that area,
Very
and
cool.
it's near the Jemez River, um, and that whole watershed, which is really exceptional as well.
Yeah, it is
And
an
then you got
exceptional watershed. I've heard of that. I
yeah,
just haven't been there. And the Calderas just seems like such a unique place. I mean, the fact that
yeah,
it's a preserve, it's so funny because you hear something like that and I mean, I literally did a few seconds on it, right? Um, I've heard of the Cimarron. We've probably all seen Cimarron reels from Ross
sure,
and everybody else, right? How many times has that area been brought up to me? But yet I have still not been there.
yeah,
And I think that's, something to just kind of think about in a holistic perspective of like, sometimes when people mention things, it's worth going. Sometimes when they mention them, it's crowded, but it's
yeah,
still worth going. So
yeah,
I love the fact that this still seems like a relatively quiet place, a beautiful preserve, etc. And
for
go
sure.
take advantage of it while I can. I mean, it's a preserve
Yeah,
now. The way things are going these days, who knows how long
yeah,
that'll
it's
last.
true.
So
And that reservation system they have really maintains the safety of the environment and the safety of the watersheds there because they don't overexploit it. They control it really carefully.
hmm
And then the great thing about fishing there or fishing the Cimarron or the Red River, you're in New Mexico. And when your day of fishing is done, you go back to Taos, you go back to Santa Fe, and you eat the most amazing food in the
yeah,
world. So
right.
it's
Yeah,
pretty great.
they can be pretty crazy. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely amazing down there. Okay, so we've got three rivers out of place, and you talked about them, and you said you're a dry fly specialist. In all three of these have been great for you for dry fly. So
Yes.
that's something in itself, right? You don't really nymph, and you've had great
I do a
success
little bit.
at
I'm
these
not a
places,
total idiot.
right? I
Yeah,
mean,
for sure.
it's so cool to think about. So if you guys are thinking about some zones to check out, there you go. I think that's three really good ones. The big one, Bigwood in Idaho, the Deschutes in Oregon, and then Red River or Caldera in New Mexico.
Yeah.
So those
What,
are trips to check out.
yeah, one thing we were going to talk about a tip at the end of the conversation. Um, Another tip that I have, and this is again sort of my idiosyncratic fly fishing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you read a lot of articles about the best fly for a different watershed,
Mm-hmm.
and you also hear the advice to fish with what you're confident with,
Mm-hmm.
and quite often that's what I'm going with. Like if it's a parachute Adams that I like to fish with because I can see the parachute on the top of the water,
Mm-hmm.
or a caddis because it's kind of a go-to fly, a royal wolf, things like that. That they're visible to the fish. They're kind of buggy,
Mm-hmm.
and why not give it a shot?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. What are a couple of your confidence flies?
I think I just mentioned them.
Those are the ones. Yeah,
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 like a parachute Adams or purple haze, which is just a
yeah. Parachute
parachute Adams.
Adams in purple, right?
Yeah. I do like a royal wolf for sure. Caddis almost always come in handy. Um, so between those three, there's a good chance I'm going to be fishing one of those.
Yeah, I am. I'm very much like you. I like to fish some patterns for dry flies that really do well for me.
Yeah.
And I would say one is I fish ant patterns, dry fly ant patterns.
Yep.
Cinnamon ants in particular seem to do really good for me. I like a caddis pattern. I use a corn fed caddis. It's like a CDC, but I also tie a foam butt on it. I've also done the same thing with elk hair, but for me, the CDC seems to have a little bit more rehabilitation to it.
Mm.
I can really shake it off, whereas elk hair caddis, it seems like they'll just get mauled a few times and then they don't
Yeah.
float like they used to.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know.
and
Have you ever fished the Mother's Day caddis hatch on the Yellowstone?
not on the Yellowstone, but I fished it here local, and it could be
Yeah.
pretty amazing. Yeah.
So on the Yellowstone, there's a particular um, caddis pattern that they like, which is a Hemingway
Uh huh.
um, caddis, and it works like a charm.
Yeah.
And for anybody who hasn't had the opportunity to hit that hatch on the Yellowstone in particular, y- once in your life at least, you got to give it a shot because when it happens, it's just incredible. And I know
Pretty
that there are other
incredible.
hatches on other rivers, but I just remember one year fishing in an area, maybe 7 or 8 miles south of Livingston, and during the morning, there's nothing going on. And I'm waiting, and then at like 1:30, suddenly the caddis are coming off, and the water is like a popcorn popper, where there
Mm.
are just heads everywhere of fish just pounding down these caddis. Um, and I'm thinking, I was just walking there 25 minutes ago and I didn't see a single
Single
fish.
fish. Right.
And now
Right.
there are hundreds of them. Where did they come from? And then your challenge, of course, is to get them to,
To
you know,
eat your fly.
exactly among the literally millions of flies on the water.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the greatest.
That is cool. That is cool. I guess my other dry fly pattern, I like two other ones. One is purple chubby Chernobyl.
Mhm.
Um, Usually smaller sizes I like. And then one of my favorites for dry fly fishing is actually it's like a you see them like cripple PMDs or cripple BWOs tied with a little bit of elk hair on the tip, and a like a pheasant tail body.
Yeah.
I tie those, but I just tie them gray, like a light gray. There's something about that thing hanging in the water,
Mhm.
that like almost clinking hammer style.
Sure.
It really, I have a lot of luck with that. That's like my go-to if like, usually I'm wearing a caddis or something because it's just so popular. But like,
Yeah.
if I get a tricky fish and they like looked at a caddis and turned away, I'm like, okay, switch it out. And that guy's a go-to. So really cool pattern.
Yeah.
All right, let's do this. We got a tip. Don't be proud. Be careful on
Right.
fly fishing. So tell me what you mean by that.
Um, as we've talked about before, almost anything can happen when you're out on the water. Um, we're just human bodies in what can be a really powerful environment. And I've learned my lesson over the years. I mentioned to you before we started recording that in just a couple of months, I'm turning 67. Um, and it's led me up to this point as an angler to really understand that being vigilant about how careful you are is probably the number one thing that you have to keep in mind because it's so easy to get hurt. It's so easy
Mm-hmm.
to put yourself in harm's way. And fortunately, in this industry, there are tools that can help you and can protect you. And it can be a weighting staff or a flotation device on your vest. Um, and having your phone and just letting people know where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know that we lose people who have sort of taken for granted the challenges that they're facing.
Yeah.
Um, so I would just say to everybody, don't think you're so tough.
Yeah.
Just make sure that you're taking care of yourself the right way. Um, I've been fortunate, and I don't want to jinx myself. I certainly have fallen in rivers
Yeah. Yep.
tons of times, um, and I have fallen in ways that could have seriously hurt myself,
Mm-hmm.
um, but have never broken a bone and never, broken my neck or something. Um, I was fishing in the Red River. It's probably 10 years ago, north of Taos, and you know, stepped on top of a streamside rock and noticed as suddenly I was no longer having a foothold and sliding down. It was like a 2 foot tall rock, and it wasn't in the river per se. But as I slipped down, I thought to myself, is this a moment when I finally break a bone? Um,
Yeah.
and I came down and I smacked my arm and I smacked my other arm and I scraped up and banged my butt. And when I was settled, I kind of gave myself a little check over and is this still working? Is that still working? Everything was fine. Um, and kind of told myself I was an idiot, got my bearings, actually caught a fish, walked downstream like 10 feet and did the same thing on a different
Different
small rock.
rock.
And it wasn't until I got home from my trip back to California, um, I got out of the shower and could see that my ass had an eggplant-sized bruise on it, that I wasn't even aware
Mm.
of. But
Right,
I did
right.
it was a good lesson to learn for sure. Just know where you're stepping and,
Yeah,
um, know where you're gonna land as well.
yeah. And that is a great topic, and I'll share a little personal story with you. So I didn't start fly fishing until after a cancer diagnosis and recovery. So I was very weak,
Mhm.
and I had been a ski mountaineer, a climber, mountain biker, etc. So I had a lot of outdoor experience. And with climbing and especially mountaineering, you understand consequences. If I were to get hurt here, what would it lead to?
Exactly.
And often in those scenarios, it's very life and death oriented, right? And so I was well prepared, I felt, when I went back to do that. And you mentioned some really key things. One, I told people where I was going because I still wanted to fish alone, frankly,
Mhm. Yep.
Um, I carried a collapsible trekking pole in my bag that I use as a waiting staff.
Mhm.
And there were times where I would be out with buddies and I'd go, I'm going to get a little antsy here. TJ's here or so and so's here. If I need some help, I can get it. But I can remember like being out in the middle of the river and being like, oh no, I went a little too far. And now it's worse because I'm getting tired. And it was really easy for me to get in my bag, open the pole and plan it and go, hey, I need your help, man. Can you come out here and help me?
Yeah.
And that was like a lifesaver. Um, so that's another thing. There's two other things. I fell in a river once. I told you the long story. I'll save everybody else from that. But I fell in the river once, and people can worry about waders and waders filling with water. And I had a belt on and everything, and I still got water into my waders. The thing is waders don't pull you down into the water. They actually create a zero buoyancy,
Yep.
but you weigh a ton. So one arm stroke trying to drag, for me, a 130-pound body was like trying to drag a 200-pound body. And it just wasn't equating to a good swim. And what I learned from that lesson was, one, always wear your belt. Two, don't fall in the water, dude. It's not worth it. It's cold.
Mhm. Yep.
And then the other one I did is I experimented a lot in the summer. So I used to wear my waders in the summer because I wanted to protect my legs from getting banged up and nicked. I had a little bit of thinner skin. And I know that happens to a lot of guys in older age, etc. There's actually a company out there now called Backcountry Skins with a Z.
Yep.
And these guys are actually going to be on the show. Or if by the time you listen to this, they've been on the show. But they produce a thin neoprene legging. And it doesn't absorb water like that. So if you were to go down, your legs are protected and you could still move around quite well. So
Mhm.
that's something to think about. But I love you had a lot of great tips. And I'll go back to that consequences thing. Like, I look at water different. Like, hey, if I wade here, what are the consequences if I fall? Am I going to
Mhm.
fall and swim into a big pool that I'll be able to not have to swim against current? Or am I going to be in this long wave train? Or are there things in the river like fences or old metal that I could get into?
Yeah.
All those little things to think about. So I think the be proud, don't be proud, but be careful element really sets in. It's not worth it, man, because like you said, you got a eggplant sized bruise on your butt and you're probably like, yeah, well, the next week I'm not fishing because I can barely walk,
Right.
right?
Yep.
And or you hurt your knee or your back and it's like, oh man, I just missed 3 weeks of my already short season. I don't want to do that. So as they say, live to fight another day or live to fish another day. That's my motto.
Exactly.
So
For sure.
well, great tips, Andy. It was really good having you on the show. Guys, You obviously met Andy, and you can see very well that he is an angler and a dry hard person at heart. Go check out his book if you have kids or family members you think might be interested in the Down by the River book. It's available on Amazon. It's also available at just about any bookstore across the country. They can order it. Let's see, fly shops a lot of times carry that, etc. And then if you have somebody who is looking for some help with sobriety, etc., check out reelinginserenity.org. That's reelinginserenity.org. Have any questions? info@reelinginserenity.org can get you there. And that's it for us here at the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast today. Andy, thanks again, and we'll see you guys soon.
Thank you, Christian. Great talking to you.
You too, bud. Bye now. Fly Fishing Insider Podcast is teamed up with Fly Fish Finder app to revolutionize your fishing adventures. Save time and unlock the ultimate experience with access to 55,000 trout streams, precise bridge data, thousands of trails, and detailed species locations. Elevate your angling with real-time maps, top camping spots, and connect with local fly shops for expert tips. This is only a little bit of what is available on the app. Discover all of it on the Fly Fish Finder app, another tool for getting better at catching fish anytime, anywhere, and for any species.